So this is weird. For the first time in 7 years, 8 years, I have to think about having headphones on my hair
Oh,
because I've never changed my hair before, which
yeah.
is it's freaking weird. I don't know. I don't
Big
know how much I
change.
like it.
Big changes.
It is big changes. This is monumental changes. But yeah, I think we're just gonna have to get in right into the questions, Martin, because the only thing I can think about at the moment is playing Zelda.
Yeah, we're interrupting our Zelda right now to give you these answers.
It's
So,
true. You have no clue, dear audience, how badly I want to just like put the business on pause for like I don't see. Here's the thing: if it were a game where I could reasonably expect to finish it in like a week, I would consider maybe
yeah, but
taking a week
who
off
knows? You
because
might
I
be like,
almost
you're going to be a third of the way through it in a week.
yeah. I never play video games like this one. I just play Overwatch for a couple matches a night or something, but I've never gotten into a game. Well, not never, but it's been years since I've gotten into a game like this where I'll start playing and play for hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've probably put 25 hours in over the weekend and the past couple of days after that, and I'm like, I don't know how far I am, but it's not far.
Yeah. It's not far.
It's definitely not even halfway. And gosh, this game like it rewards exploration so much that I feel compelled to actually go do all the side quests and everything. Actually, and by the way, before anyone turns this off, we're not going to spoil anything about this in this little pre-episode chit chat.
Yeah. But spoiled it. It's good.
Yeah,
Spoilers. It's good.
12 out of 10.
Yeah.
13.5 out of 10. One person he wrote an article on Forbes. I think the title was something like "Why Zelda Breath of the Wild like reprogrammed my brain when it comes to open world games." Because he was saying like all these other open world games he'd played, they're all so focused on completion percentage and collecting, 10 out of 10 things or clearing all these areas or like clearing all these things off the map, like all the Ubisoft games, Assassin's Creed, all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then, he says, I'm playing Zelda and like, I'll look over and there's a thing over there and, there's not really a numbery reward for me doing that thing. It might even be, disadvantageous for me to do that thing logically, but I just want to do it because it's fun. And
Yeah.
I've been noticing the same thing. I'm just like, yeah, I don't really need to go do that, but I want to just for the fun of doing it.
Yeah, you're not just like, look, a hidden feather or something. Like, that's from one of the Assassin's Creed, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
From one of the old ones.
Yeah, really the only thing I liked doing side quest wise in the old Assassin's Creeds was like in 2, I really liked finding those glitches to do the puzzles that related to like all the lore and conspiracy theories and stuff.
Yeah.
That was fun. But like the rest of like collecting whatever, I didn't care about at all.
You know what? They were putting the over justification effect on their open world stuff.
That's true. Yep.
That's it. This one doesn't give me rewards. The reward has to be intrinsic.
Yeah. And it really is. Like, I think they really nailed like it's about the adventure. It's about being in the moment kind of thing. And I commend them for that. Good job, Nintendo.
Oh, yeah. This is dangerous territory, so we should start thinking about questions.
Okay, so first things first. What is this, episode 152?
I don't know anymore.
Looking at my publishing schedule here.
Yes,
this is going
152.
out March 27th. So, dear listener, as you listen to this, we will be driving to our new home in Denver. Because that's the day, right? March 27th?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
I mean, if you happen to
We're
be
currently on a really long drive.
Yeah, if you happen to be one of those cool people who actually listens on the day of launch, which is about half of you within the first week, I'd say probably about a third of the people.
Oh, yeah?
Because episodes are like getting up near, I think, like 15K.
Cool.
Typically, and like 5K, I think, are the first day downloads at this point. So that's pretty cool. We've also got the YouTube channel that's still catching up. But yeah, we've got 3 brand new questions for you. Maybe you'll find them relevant to your own life. And I like this first one because I just downloaded a new audiobook. So I've had like audiobooks on the brain. So this first question is, I attend college at a large university that is spread throughout a city. So I tend to walk between all my classes or take the bus if I need to. What are some ways that I can use this time to study or get some work done? And that's why I said
Right,
first
so
thing that came to my mind.
Audiobook is one of your answers.
Yeah. I did an ad for Audible on I guess the last video that I made as we record this, the one on Better Sleep. And This often happens to me. Like I'll do an ad for a company and then like I use them. And I mean, I've been
The,
I've
the
been
ad
using
worked on you.
I've been using Audible for years, like since I was, I don't know, 17 years old or something. But because they reached out and did that, I was like, maybe I should go look again and see what's on audiobooks. Because I've been trying to make myself read books on my iPad lately. But then I realized like I spend a lot of time driving and cooking and whatever. So I'm going to get a new audiobook, which I haven't done in a couple of months. And I'm currently going through the Everything Store, which is like the whole story about the rise of Amazon, which is actually pretty cool.
Huh.
Yeah. So audiobooks definitely a way to do it. Podcasts as well. We've got this podcast. We've got Listen Money
Oh, yeah.
Matters.
This is a podcast.
If you want to increase your financial knowledge, my favorite podcast, which is Hardcore History, absolutely amazing show. And I've also been getting into the Joe Rogan podcast recently, and you probably don't know who he is, but he's a weird guy. He's like a fight commentator for UFC, but also a comedian, but also like his podcast is just conversations with anyone and everyone.
Oh, yeah. I think you told me about this.
Well,
Maybe
I think
on the last episode.
the episode I told you about, he had like that crazy conspiracy guy,
Yeah.
Alex Jones, on there.
Yeah.
But then like recently he had Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh, those
And
aren't
then-
similar people.
Yeah. And then he had like Philip DeFranco from the YouTube channel. God, it's like everyone on his show.
Huh.
So I think he's just like a guy who's really curious about everything and is willing to talk to pretty much anyone who has something interesting to say. And I think it's a pretty good podcast, and obviously it's doing well. So that's probably the reason why. But yeah, so audiobooks, podcasts. There's also productive meditation. And this is a concept that Cal Newport talked about in his book, Deep Work. But I think this is something a lot of people do. And it's just like deliberately think through problems you're working on or any challenges you're trying to solve while you're walking to class. And I actually find this sometimes more helpful than sitting down and thinking deliberately while I'm, sitting down in the context of working.
Yeah.
Like I wrote half of the last video in my head while I was out on a run because I don't know, when you're getting out there, when you're physically active, like you get your brain into a different context, different frame of mind, and you come up with better ideas sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. When I'm scheduling out my workday, if I have something I need to think about, I'll just deliberately say, go think about stuff while walking or longboarding or biking or something, because it's way better than thinking about it sitting down in my room.
Mm-hmm. But I'm going to be honest. Those are the only 2 bullet points that I had written down for this.
Oh, yeah?
Like I had a third one, but it's kind of like a not bullet point because my third one was like, maybe don't get work done when you're walking through the city. I mean, we're all about productivity on this podcast, but isn't there something to just being present and enjoying your walk and not getting hit by a bus?
Yeah.
And I don't know, just enjoying
that one's especially useful.
all the sounds and everything.
But being present-minded, that's like unproductive meditation. You're just intaking and existing and being calm.
Yeah.
That's a pretty dope way to spend a walk. That's what I do a lot when I'm not trying to solve a problem.
And I guess if you're on a bus, like you have more options because you could actually pull a book out or you could pull your Nintendo Switch out.
Or like Anki. You could be doing some vocabulary reviews on Anki or Memrise if you're foreign language studying.
Yeah, I think
or
if you're on
anything
a
else.
bus, you have less of a chance of getting hit by a bus. So in that case, sure, look at your phone. You can get any sort of like Anki or what are the other apps? What was it? Tiny Cards?
Oh, yeah,
that
yeah.
the
The
one?
Duolingo run one.
Yeah, that's the one. Duolingo. Yeah, and you could do Duolingo itself. So if
Yeah.
you have any sort of like review apps on your phone, or you could read a book or something, there's a lot of things you could do on a bus. But if you're walking to class, I would say audiobooks and podcasts. Maybe like if you need to do business calls like I do, you could call people on your phone and talk. Like I've done that
suppose
before.
You could do that.
If it's not a windy day, I've actually gone outside and went for a walk during like a mastermind call before. But if it's windy, it gets really noisy for the other people. So I want to pay attention to their needs when I'm doing that. But otherwise, just be present, enjoy the walk. You're getting exercise. That's still productive.
Yeah, and time to de-stress, just 10 minutes to de-stress. If you're thinking about being productive all day, you might burn yourself out pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
So
strategic laziness.
Yeah.
It's all about taking a good break.
Manage your energy.
Mm-hmm. The other thing you could think about is, if you want to get to where you're going faster, get a bike or a skateboard or something, and then maybe you have an extra 10 minutes or so at class where you could do something at the desk.
Yeah.
That's another idea. But yeah, those are some ideas there. So, the second question is I have exams coming up in a few months, and I'd really like to get ahead on preparing, but I feel like I'm wasting time preparing now as I won't remember anything by the time the exams come around. So, do you have any advice on how to get ready for your exams early? And my initial thought here is like, if you're in a class that's structured well, shouldn't the work be preparing you for the exam along the way?
Yeah, if the class is structured in the way that it probably should be,
Yeah.
paying attention to the homework, paying attention to the lectures, and actually learning what it is rather than just skating by with whatever minimum listening you can do, that's kind of already studying early.
Yeah. Now, if the question is like I'm a month out from finals or I'm 3 weeks out, then we can get into, all right, now it's time to start setting up like a final exam prep schedule. Maybe you can actually figure out some spaced repetition intervals for reviewing.
Yeah,
maybe
if
you
you're
have a
early,
study
spaced
guide.
repetition is that's the best way if you have something very specific that you think you'll forget. You have plenty of spaced repetition cycles to get you through so that you might have it memorized by the time the exam comes around.
Yeah. And I think I interrupted you. Were you going to say something else?
No,
Okay.
just the spaced repetition.
Yeah. So if you're a few months out, like the thing is, you may want to prepare and you may want to get ahead of the game at a surface level, but your brain actually doesn't really consider that information all that important because it is delayed by quite a bit in when you're going to need it. And that's kind of how our brains work. There's like this, and I forget the term right now, but the further off you're going to need something or the further off a reward is going to come, the less importance that your brain puts on it because we are programmed to be here and now creatures, which was important for most of human existence.
Yeah.
And now you have to live with that biology. So you can certainly try to create like a schedule where you're reviewing things to take advantage of the spacing effect. But I think that the most prudent thing to do is just to make sure that you are absolutely crushing it on the work you have to do now, because that is going to be important to you. Your brain's going to encode it better. And then it should provide a solid base for you to review when you get a little bit closer to those exams. Boom. We're just trucking through stuff in this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like this is going to be the shortest podcast ever, but maybe not. I don't know.
I think it's that thirst for Hyrule.
It seriously is. I can't do it, Martin. I can't think of it. I was sitting there in the coffee shop this morning and I was like, I need to write a video, but Zelda.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
See, this is the risk you run. And actually, so this isn't a question on this week's podcast, but I had somebody email me like probably over a year ago, and they were asking me like, how do you productively play video games when you're a busy college student? And my answer at the time was like, why don't you just pick games that don't suck you in for hours at a time? And that answer came easily because I am not the kind of person who tends to get sucked into long, huge games like this. But now, because of this one, like, I think I can double down to that answer because, my mind is like literally distracted like crazy right now.
Not a great game for productivity.
And and like take Overwatch, for example, or, Team Fortress 2 or any like game where you can jump in, play a few rounds and get done. That game never distracts me when I'm working because I basically know the experience I'm going to have and I know it's going to be fun, but it's really easy to say, okay, I'm going to do that later and I'm going to do my work now.
Yeah.
But like Zelda's a game that kind of gets its hooks in you. And I've just been like thinking about it,
Your brain is half in that world. You're living two lives right now.
Yeah. So I'm not saying you should not play big adventure games when you're in college, but like if you do have a problem with video games and you find that it is a distraction, that is probably something to think about.
Yeah.
Like the selection of games, it would be the same thing as like getting involved in like a really, really good novel that's like 1,000 pages. Like The Wise Man's Fear basically stopped me in my tracks when it came to work for a few days.
Yeah.
Because I was like, this is a 1,000-page book and I don't want to do anything else right now.
Yeah, I suppose you could probably dedicate like, I'm going to play these short, easy games throughout most of the week when I'm busy, but say Saturday or something, I'm gonna put like 1 billion hours in this big game. Or actually last night, because I wanted to go to bed at a decent time and Zelda has ruined my sleeping schedule, my strategy last night was that I had been playing Zelda for a bit, and then I noticed it was starting to get late, and then I knew that if I chased that one thing I wanted to do in Zelda, it was going to turn into like 30 things and take 4 hours.
Yep.
So then I switched games, still playing games. I switched over to Fast RMX, just a racing F-Zero kind of game on the Switch, which is that kind of wound me down a little bit and took me out of the Zelda world so that I could pay attention to what time it was.
It's kind of funny that a game where you're in like a jet hover car going a
Yeah, it
zillion miles
wound
an
me
hour
down a little bit.
winds you down, relaxes you.
Yeah,
This is
and
what I do to
and the
decompress,
relaxing adventure game is the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. Why not play Snipper Clips?
But
That
yeah,
seems relaxing.
I mean, maybe you could do all your work first, then play that game. But then, if it's getting too late or something, or you have something coming up and you know you're not going to pay attention, switch to a different game. That way, you're still rewarding yourself with game. But certain games are easier to pull out of.
Yeah, that's true. Because the immediate thought when I said like maybe you should select games that don't suck you in is like, well, can't you be a productive person and still allow yourself to play the kind of games you want to play? And I guess what you have to do is just structure your time so that you let yourself get sucked in, but only at times when it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And maybe just doing it on the weekend is the answer, you know? Maybe like you can only do it on like from Friday night to Saturday so that Sunday is like a gap day. Because I know like I played Zelda all Sunday and then I woke up on Monday and I was like,
oh yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
So
you
maybe
need a little bit of space so that you can get back out of the game world and think about the real world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think having space is a good idea because when you're like forced to stop, but you haven't had like time to choose to stop and to kind of like ease out of it, then it can be frustrating. And I think that may be one of the things that leads to being distracted all day long.
Well, that's what I mean. Like
something like that.
You end up going to sleep at 1:30, 2 o'clock. I have been a couple of nights just on accident. And when you're like, well, I'm so exhausted and I don't want to quit, but I guess I'll quit. It's not the same as if you were going to say, okay, I've got 2 or 3 hours left in the day. I'm going to play another hour. I'm going to switch over to something that gets me out of it. And then 2 hours, I'm way out. I'm ready to sleep. I'm fine now.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Your night actually feels like you completed it as opposed to it was interrupted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. I think like, yeah, completing something and like being the one who chooses to complete it definitely helps.
Yeah.
Cool. So this last question relates to how we read and then highlight our books. So the question is, having just watched the How to Be Lazy and Still Get Stuff Done video, I'm interested in the sticky labels that I saw in your Mind for Numbers book. I want to get back into reading physical books. So is there a process that you use to label the relevant sections or highlight? And what about highlighting and taking notes in the book itself without using those little book flags? Also, what about ebooks? So I take this question to be, what is our general process for highlighting books, both digital and physical?
Yeah. And with a bonus, you use sticky colored labels, right? Are they colored?
Yes.
I don't think I've seen them.
Yeah, I think they're just called book flags. Let me look.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience labeling physical books because I haven't read a lot of physical books in the last couple years.
Really?
Well, my nerve injury that
That's right.
I'm more or less fine-ish now, but for a while I couldn't actually hold a physical book and read it very well, especially if it was big.
Yeah, that's true. So you've just been doing stuff on like
I've been reading Kindle books.
Your Kindle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you search Post-it flags on Amazon or anywhere else that sells things like this, you can get them at Walmart too. They're just like these little semi-transparent colored plastic tabs, and one side is sticky. So I use these instead of highlighting my books because I can make them stick a little bit out of the pages. So that way when the book is closed, I can kind of see everywhere where I've marked a passage.
Oh, yeah.
And I got that idea from your friend Will, actually, because he did that with a lot of his books.
Oh, yeah. He totally lent me a book and it had flags all through it.
Just tons of flags. Yeah, the only problem I run into with that is I will read certain books where like everything is interesting. So I'll have a zillion flags. And I haven't done this myself, but because there are multiple colors, you could do something where like maybe a green flag is just an important key takeaway. And then like a yellow flag is a really good quote that you want to remember word for word or something like that. Like you could, you could like categorize your flags in terms of the content that it's highlighting, which might be useful.
That's cool.
The one thing I will note is this is something that Marty Lobdell talked about in his Study Less, Study Smart lecture, which is the lecture that I summarized on my channel. The thing about highlighting is that highlighting can lead you down a road where you start to mistake your recollection with recognition. So if it's, and I think this is less important for like books you read for fun, because it might not matter that you can recall things immediately. But like if you're reading a textbook and you need to remember some stuff for a test, a lot of people will highlight everything they think is important. And then when they're going through and studying, they'll see what they highlighted. They will recognize that they highlighted it, and they will recognize that they thought it was important, but then they may forget to actually challenge themselves to recall that material from memory.
So they're taking good notes essentially, but they're not actually studying them.
Well, it's not even that they're good notes, because
Oh yeah, I guess you don't
good
have the
notes,
active part of
like if
notes.
you have given a source a good set of notes, is something that summarizes and picks out the most important stuff. But just like a map that is the same exact size that the territory it represents is not useful because it would literally cover the whole entire territory, like notes that are even half of what the source is, it's too much.
Yeah.
Because you're just at that point you're almost looking at the textbook again. And I've seen people who like have almost everything highlighted in their textbook. Like that's not useful to you, because at that point the only thing that really sticks out is the stuff that isn't highlighted, which is
Yeah.
like the most unimportant stuff.
Yeah, you've got to do like an 80-20 and pull the most important stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I've, even with the books I read for like fun, quote unquote, or just like for work, I have to be a little discerning about what I highlight. And actually, recently I've been reading more on my iPad because I really like iBooks and I really like the highlighting system. I can just put my finger somewhere and drag and I have a highlight. And then what I really love is that you have a section for each book where it just gives you a list of all your highlights. So like for deep work, I've got just a list of, I don't know, 50 or 60 highlighted passages that I can go right back to the part in the book where I was reading, and that's really helpful. But again, if I do too much, which I am want to do, it gets a little overwhelming and I can't find what I was looking for anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I would just say like try to be discerning with what you highlight, and maybe you're reading a chapter in a book where there's a main statement that is put up front. That's like the main idea. And then they go through like 4 or 5 case studies and they kind of reiterate the same point again and again, but with different wordings. Well, the first time you're reading that, all those different wordings can seem insightful because they're saying things in a different way or they're connecting it to a different story, and you might want to highlight them all. But when you really distill it afterwards, you can kind of realize that, you know what, I think this was just reinforcing this earlier point. So maybe I'm just going to highlight the initial point, and if this case study is just saying the same thing, I'll read it and I'll let it reinforce the point, but I'm not going to highlight it for later review. But if it is highlighting something that is new or important as like something to bolster the main point or like a caveat or something like that, then you can highlight that as well.
Yeah, that's more or less exactly what I'm doing with nonfiction on my Kindle, because I'll highlight a piece, knowing that it only needs to be this piece, like one or two good sentences. That's the point. And then if I need to read the other stuff, I can just click that highlight and it'll bring me right back. I'll just read the section again.
Yeah.
But you can check actually in your web browser, and I don't remember the URL, but I'll probably put it up in the show notes if it's a universal URL. But you can look at all your Kindle highlights across all books.
Oh, that's nice.
So I can go to it right now, and I could go to whatever nonfiction I read last and just read through more or less my own Cliff Notes.
That's cool.
And it has links. It's like, this is what page it's on. And you can add notes. So this one has a note that I specifically related to me. But if you highlight all of it, then it's not useful.
What device are you reading on?
I read on my Kindle.
Is it like a Kindle Paperwhite or?
Yeah.
So it's like got the papery screen.
I love the like digital ink thing.
Can you type on that?
Yes.
So
it's not very fast. It's not nearly as responsive because it's just not designed to be.
Yeah.
But I can take rudimentary notes, and actually, if you log into the browser, you can edit the notes there. So if I want to type something really long, then I'll just highlight it and then go to the browser and then say, here's a bunch of stuff I thought about this. And
that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah. I love that I can check it in the browser.
I was about to get jealous of you because I use iBooks, but I just realized that iBooks is on the Mac. So I can just open the program and all my stuff is there. So I basically have the same thing. I just can't access it on my Windows computer.
I just like the digital ink, so I prefer Kindles.
Yeah, that is nice. One thing I actually do, because I will highlight a good amount of stuff when I'm reading a book, but one thing I'll do is, not for every highlight, but if I get an idea, I will tap the highlight and you can add a note to your highlight.
Yeah.
So I'm reading through Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion right now, and say I'm reading about like social proof, and there's a, something from a scientific study or case study, I'll highlight it, but then I can be like, boom, this would be useful to think about when I'm creating a sales page for a product in the future, or maybe even when I'm thinking about like pitching a speaking client, or even when I'm crafting the way I'm going to write a script in a video. If I want to be persuasive about this particular practice, maybe say that, this famous person and this famous person used it to give it some more credence.
Yeah.
So if you can connect whatever you're reading about to something you already think about or something you've already done, that will further serve to bolster your memory of what you read about.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I used to do, I haven't done this in a while because it was very labor intensive, but if you truly want to really encode that information that you learn from the books you're reading, when you finish a chapter or a reading session, go back through what you just read and write some notes. And you could write in the margins of your book if you wanted to, but the way I always did it was I just had a note in Evernote for that book, and I would just create a bullet list of like the key highlights.
Yeah.
So I've got like a huge one for The Power of Habit. I've got a big one for what's it called? How to Win Friends, Influence People. I think I have one for that, and then I have one for another book that I can't remember at the moment, but it does take a lot of extra time. And as somebody who already has a very packed schedule, I find it like difficult to summon the discipline to always do that. But it is a very good way to learn what you're reading well. Because if you just gloss over what you're reading, then you're not going to remember most of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are some ideas. Hopefully that helps. And you'll probably be able to find that URL thing, right?
Yeah, I think there's a generic one. At the least, I could probably say how to get to it. I'm just not sure if it's like a nonsense URL based on my personal username or something.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I'm sure there's something.
We'll find the instructions at least to get to it. If you happen to have a Kindle, if you have iBooks, you can just go to your highlights section in the app on your Mac or on your iPad or even your iPhone, which is pretty nice. That's what I prefer. And that actually might be a good way to do it. Rather than doing it in Evernote, you could go through your highlights after you finish reading a chapter and just add notes to each one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That could be something.
Then it'd all
as
be
well.
in one place. And there was one thing I forgot. There was one time where we were talking about a podcast idea or a video idea or something. And there was a quote that I wanted to look for.
Mm-hmm.
And because I knew that I had highlighted this quote and I didn't know what book it was in, because all my highlights from every book are on one page, I could just search through it in the browser.
That's pretty nice.
And then it's like, oh, this is the book you were talking about, Martin. So that's pretty cool.
Here we go. Okay,
if you're researching something that spans a lot of books,
I found my book notes my book notes notebook in Evernote. So I've got The Power of Habit. I did How to Win Friends and How to Win Friends. That's a word. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Well, probably by speaking eloquently and articulately. That'd be a good way to do it. To start.
Sometimes.
I did Think Smart, a neuroscientist's prescription for improving your brain's performance. And I didn't finish that one. And then the other one that I was doing was a book called The Discoverers, which is an excellent history book, and I highly recommend it. But I found that this one was a little tough, and I think maybe this method of taking notes works better for certain books versus other kinds of books, because The Discoverers isn't really a book that argues for an idea or tries to teach you a specific topic. The Discoverers is like, here's the history of human ingenuity and inventions across all time, basically. Like, it starts, not all time, but actually kind of all time, because it starts with the development of the clock.
Oh.
Back in, I don't know, like monk times, back in medieval times, pretty much, and even earlier than that. And then it goes up through, well, the modern time as of when the author wrote it, which was the 80s. So the way I took notes on this one is I would just like put the date and I would put the pages I read, and then I would take some notes. But I'm looking through here and it's like, it's a lot of little details, like pendulum isochronism, which is the swing duration defined by length of pendulum, not the width of the swing arc.
So like interesting stuff, but it's not really the main point that you
and the thing is like there is no main point in that book.
Yeah, it's
like,
not a lesson.
This section I read talked about this guy named Ricci, who was like a Jesuit missionary who learned about clocks. It talked about springs, talked about why the Chinese wanted clocks, which was not for keeping time. It was because they thought they were cool, antique, amusing toys and stuff like that. Like there was it's just all this like history. And I suppose if I had been studying for a test, then there would have been some incentive to go back and review each of these sections. but I wasn't. I was just reading it for fun.
Yeah.
And in that case, maybe it's not the best use of my time to be writing like these super detailed notes about stuff because my brain doesn't know what's important. It's just like it's cool to learn, and maybe it would be better off for me to just like learn it by reading and then make connections throughout the course of my life later on.
Yeah. And you're
Whether
never
it's
going to remember
watching
everything.
a movie or something. Yeah. And I'm looking through all this stuff and like, I don't remember most of it, to be honest, because a lot of it's just like, it's fact after fact after fact.
Yeah, you don't really know which facts are going to stick in your head if you're just reading for fun. You don't know which ones are going to be important or reinforce themselves.
Though, so now I'm looking through it, and so this January 19th section here, I can see that it's talking about how like the Mongols like raised the Iron Curtain, which was like the Muslims basically preventing the Western traders from at least cheaply going through the Middle East to trade with China. And having listened to the Hardcore History series on the Mongols like twice or three times now, I'm like, yes, I know that very well.
Yeah,
Because
they're
now I've
related
exposed
to something.
myself. Yeah, and I've exposed myself to two different sources on that topic, which is pretty cool. But then in other things in here, I'm like, I remember that I read it, but it's not really like I couldn't recall it if you asked me, who is the Portuguese sailor who first circumnavigated the African coast, or that's not the right term, who first navigated the African southern coast? Like, I don't know. No clue.
I don't know.
But for a book like The Power of Habit, each chapter is about an idea. Chapter 1 is about the habit loop. Chapter 2 is about anticipation and craving. Chapter 3 is about replacing the routine of a habit, so on and so forth. So with that, there's a main idea, and then most of the details in the chapter, you don't have to remember each little individual tiny thing. All you got to remember is like, this is why the main idea is what it is, and everything else is kind of serving to prop up that main idea.
Yeah.
So that I found was much more useful to write notes on, because now if someone's like, why does a keystone habit work so well? Or why is it important to replace the routine? I can think back and be like, oh yeah, I remember about, that one coach who, coached for the Colts and the Bucks and what he did and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So if you can find something you can highlight that seems to stand for like 5 other things you might want to highlight,
Yeah.
that's the superior highlight.
Yeah. So maybe if you're just reading a for fun history book, don't spend hours and hours taking notes unless you really want to.
Yeah.
But if you're reading a book where you think like, these are ideas that I can use in my life, then taking notes might be a much more worthwhile use of your time.
Cool.
Boom. All right. So that is one podcast for the day down. This is episode 152, meaning you can find the show notes for this episode over at cigpodcast.com/152. And in those show notes, we'll have links, including the link to, if you have a Kindle, find your notes in the URL in the browser. And we'll link to those books that I talked about as well. And other than that, if you want to find our favorite resources for improving your college experience or your experience regardless of what educational level you're at, you'll find all of our favorite tools for managing your day, becoming more productive, learning more externally outside of class, all that kind of stuff over at collegeinfogeek.com/resources. So check that page out if you're curious. And other than that, we will see you in next week's episode. Thank you.